And hello there, everybody. This is Alex Davis, coordinator for the UK Ghost Story Festival. I'm delighted to be joined for the latest in our series of YouTube interviews by author, editor, novelist, short story writer, event organizer Paul Kane, who's laughing wryly as I say all that. That's quite a list, a man of many talents. Delighted to have you here with us today, Paul. Thanks so much. And
I thought you were going to say Garth Marenghi then.
Dreamweaver, Imagineer, wonderful. I have just read his book, which was great. Before we go down that rabbit hole, we're here to talk about ghost stories and the UK Ghost Story Festival. We'll probably be taking part with a reading and a panel as well at the Saturday of the event. I wanted to ask a little bit about short stories before we get to your, for instance, because you're obviously well known as a novelist, but also write a lot of short stories, number of kind of short story collections out there, often featured in anthologies. And I think it's one of those things I've noticed is the ghost story seems to work really well in that format when you go back to so many of your sort of classic writers. Many sort of made their name in short stories. I was going to ask you, why do you think ghost stories and sort of short fiction go so well together?
Well, I mean, speaking personally for myself, I find it quite hard. I've never written a ghost ghost story novel. So I find it quite hard to sustain that kind of suspense and tension for over it. So I've got a massive amount of admiration for people like Adam Neville, Alison Littlewood, Laura Purcell, who's coming to the event, Michelle Paver. Jim Herbert did it a lot with things like Haunted and Secret of Crickley Hall. So I've got a massive amount of respect for people who can do it to that length, because I might have a go at one at some point and see, just as an exercise to see if I can do it. But I find it quite hard to sustain that for that period of time. I just reread Mike Carey's Felix Castor book, the first one, The Devil You Know, and that's got a haunting in it at an archive. And I think it helps to have like other things going on in there, like he's got the noir detective thing going on, so he's got gangsters in there and everything. So I think it helps to have other things going on as well as the haunting if you're doing like a longer thing. But as for the short stories, I think it's that kind of, I think it was Stephen King who said he equated short stories to like a kiss, and a novel was like a relationship. So I think that kind of thing of like getting in there, scaring people, and then getting out again before you get sort of the hand on your shoulder kind of thing. So I think that's probably why it works better in that kind of like the short, even like what I would consider like the greatest ghost story novels are quite short, like The Woman in Black and Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson. They're still quite short. I mean, sort of what we say novella length, really. Some of them, aren't they? I mean, So I think that it's the thing of keeping it, keeping that suspense going, keeping the tension going. I think it's quite hard to do in a longer form. I've got a lot of I'm in awe of people who can do that. I've got lots of things going on in mine. Lots of big monsters and things and.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic stuff. I want to talk on the topic of short stories. Obviously, I'm very interested in kind of, obviously you've put together, co-edited a number of whole host of anthologies over the years. I'm just really curious, kind of how you tend to go about that, and suppose like what are you looking for in a short story with that editor hat on instead of the writer hat on?
It's different every time. I mean, I do a lot of the anthologies with my better half, Marie O'Regan. Coming to the Ghost Story Festival as well, and it's different every time. I mean, it starts off differently. It might be like we might be talking about it on the settee, or we're out and say, wouldn't that make a good anthology if we did whatever it was, and then we start batting things around, and sometimes a publisher will come to us and say, do you fancy doing X, Y, and Z, and sometimes it starts off that way. Sometimes it just starts off with us pitching an idea, getting some people together, and just sort of pitching ideas. But in terms of what you're looking for in a short story, it's different. You can't really. It's how long is a piece of string. It's and it's. I think it comes from just like, I mean, reading short stories all our lives, both of us, and I mean, Marie often talks about how she got into writing and reading. She borrowed a book called Thin Air, which was an anthology, and she kept kind of taking it out of the library at school. And similar thing for me. I mean, mine was Ghosts, Spectres and Spectres, I think it was called. And you just kind of get into them from that early age to like, I won't say how old I am, the age you are, now. You've been reading them all your life, so it's anthologies and short stories and things. So I think you get a sense of what works and what doesn't. And obviously, if you write them as well, you can see it from your. It's all subjective. You can see it from your perspective, but I think as a reader, you can sort of see it if you've been reading these stories all your lives. Ghost stories and horror stories and crime stories, whatever it is. And you just get a sense of what kind of works and what doesn't, I think. So, what are you looking for? We don't really know until we see it, really. I mean, it's
yeah. I hear that from a lot of people in publishing. We know it when we see it.
It's hard. I mean, I know that doesn't help people when they're and writing things, but it is that kind of just sense of what. I mean, the advice I would give was just like write something that you feel yourself quite passionate about and you think will work, and write it. And chances are, if you would want to read that story, then that's the story that will work and people will remember. As you move forward, sort of. But it's very different. I mean, putting the whole thing together, we're just coming to the end stages of putting a manuscript together now. So we're going through all they go backwards and forwards to authors, and you do the edits and you do passes on them and everything, and then you get the stories back, and then you put more together into the manuscript, and that has to go off to the publishers. And so there's a whole kind of process to it. But you could be working on one for like a year. I think we signed the two that are coming out in April and May. We signed the contracts for those at the end of 2021. That would have been a long anthology.
Long bit of work. Yeah. Just feels like it.
Yeah, I'm losing track of like the years like everybody else. But yeah, 2021, I think it was about sort of November time. So, and they're just coming out in a few months' time. So that's the length of kind of period of time you could be working on an anthology. It's a long time.
Fantastic stuff. And you're chairing the enviable task of chairing our panel on a location in the ghost stories. I was going to ask you first of all, why do you think the idea of location, particularly within the genre, sort of matters so much?
I think it matters in any story. I think you've got to have the location right. You've got to have it. I mean, that is exactly the question that I'll probably be putting to the panelists on the. We've seen what they say to that. Yeah. But I think sometimes the location comes first. Sometimes the characters come first, and then you put them in a location. But I mean, if you think about lots of locations in stories that have really kind of stayed with you, they become like a character in themselves. Whether it's like a haunted house or a graveyard or a coal mine or something like that, and it's got to fit. And sometimes that will you couldn't have a ghostly miners in the Arctic, say, or something like that. It's got to fit where it is. So it's got to actually fit in the story, and it will sometimes suggest a ghostly encounter, or might be a cave system or something like that. I think I said in the blog interviews that the first one that I ever wrote with the kind of mind to send it off anywhere was the Cave of Lost Souls, which came to me, sort of sounds corny, but it came to me in a dream, and it was like lots of kind of visits to the seaside and Scarborough and Bridlington, places like that, and these like cave systems that you see there. And that just suggested this cave of it's like a local legend where the lost souls go, and that just kind of suggested. I mean, it's got a very long history, the coast of ghost stories, and Whistle I Come to You, and things like that. But I think it is important in terms of like, and also as a writer, what you can get out of that location. What you can kind of wring out of that location. Will it be enough meat for a short story or a novel even?
Absolutely.
Dread. Writing a novel fills me with dread in one place. I meant to say I wrote one called Creakers once, which was only about 7,000 words, and it seems to me I adapted that into a feature script, and it seems to me it's easier to do that than to kind of sustain it over a novel.
Yeah, true.
In prose, it seems like an hour and a half. You can sort of expand 7,000 words to a script, but it seems a bit harder to do it in novel form. But I mean, if you think of all the famous, I mean, Michelle Paver's a great example of that. I love that. dark matter and thin air, another thinner. On the mountainsides or in the snowy waste. And it's also kind of cuts off the person from any kind of help, that can immediately come to that person. You can't just kind of get on your mobile phone and say, I'm having these difficulties, because you totally cut off from that. I mean, I know they're set in the past, but you could set one now that's sort of cut off, very cut off.
Yeah.
I've just read it. It's a crime novel, but I read a novel called Freeze just before Christmas to give it a quote, and that kind of cut off all the contestants in this game show, sort of live game show type type of thing, and that cut them off, in an icy, snowy kind of wasteland. And it just, these days you've got to get rid of that mobile phone. You've got to get rid of all the things that can help your characters. So, an isolated place is quite nice.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. And last question I'm going to ask, you've got reading slots at the festival as well. You may know, start to think about it. I was wondering if you might give us a little clue what you might be reading over the weekend. Well, it's too early to say. That's fine.
I did have this before Christmas. I was like, I've got this idea for something. I won't say what it is yet, because I started writing it and I realized it was going to be a lot bigger than 5,000 words, which is what you need for like half-hour reading. So I started writing out. I thought I'll have to shelve that and kind of put it to one side and do it some other time, because this is going to like get out of control. So I think I'm going to go back to like one of my old favorites from the old Ghost collection from years ago. I mean, I started to think about things like Wind Chimes, which got made into a film, and The Suicide Room, and I thought that's a bit heavy for Saturday morning.
After Lightfoot,
and the last one I read was Presence, which was like over 3 years ago now at the Ghost Story Festival. I can't believe it's been 3 years, but it was a very sort of emotional. I think Marie read In the Howling of the Wind and I read Presence, and we basically broke the room. People were just in floods of tears these readings. So I thought I'll try and go for something that kind of tugs at the heartstrings again. So I might read Grandpa's Chair, which is an old favourite of mine, which is about an 11-year-old boy who like loses his granddad, and it's like diary entries and things. So I might go for it. It's also quite hopeful as well, which is, you don't want something too depressing at the start of the Saturday morning. So I might go for that.
Oh well, great. If I see people, looking like they've had a good blob, I know where to come. If I see people with, have been crying, I'll come to you.
In a good way, hopefully.
Hopefully, absolutely brilliant stuff. Thanks so much for joining us today, Paul. Really, really appreciate it. Obviously, really look forward to seeing you at the festival on the Saturday of the event, and should be a part of a very busy program that day. So thanks so much for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you in February.
See you all there.
Thank you.